what does success look like to you now?
Early on, success was survival and, the excitement of doing things, getting through a week. I'd be just looking constantly. What orders do I need to get out? What sales do I need to do to pay for what's going on? And I guess now success is about milestones and setting the goal and setting the agendas. My love for what we're making at the time, and then my relationship with the staff. When we're doing well, there's a lot of excitement and energy around, whether it's an opening or a new collection or
It sounds like feeling supported, by the team, like highs and lows, but just having that consistent.
Yeah, well, you want to make sure that what we're doing is something that everyone feels excited about. So that's what I'd call success.
Welcome to Behind the Design, a podcast where we unfold the details behind the designs we know and love and explore how each project comes to life. I am Camilla Ingall, owner of Unfolded, an interior design and styling studio. In this podcast series, we dive into the details with our industry experts, covering topics such as the creative process, latest design trends, and how we, as an industry, work together to meet the brief and overcome challenges. Let the conversation begin.
Welcome back to Behind the Design, the podcast where we go beyond aesthetics to explore the people, processes, and passion that shape the spaces we love. I'm your host, Camilla Ingall, interior designer and founder of Unfolded, and today I'm joined by Charles Hinckfuss, the founder and creative mind behind MCM House. If you've ever walked into an MCM showroom, you'll know the feeling. Relaxed, textural, and lived in. I've used MCM pieces in my own projects, and there's something unmistakable about their warmth and ease. Charlie's created a brand that feels beautifully Australian, yet effortlessly global, blending authenticity, simplicity, and soul. Charlie, welcome to Behind the Design.
Pleasure to be here.
If we start back before MCM House, you had a vintage store and you were running Chuck and Bob Vintage. Tell me a little bit about your journey from then.
Lucky enough, I had an uncle who had an antique store, Manning and Manning, who kindly said to me, come up and, learn the trade. Pretty early on, we decided that I was going to do a store. And it's pretty exciting. I was 22, 23, moving from Melbourne to Sydney, found my own little, retail space that we transformed. It was about creating, the coolest store, not so much furniture. It was a store full of decorative arts. The objects and the things we were trying to sell were endless. We had cool picnic tables that are from the 50s, big camel heads, paper planes that we'd bought from Japan. I even had some little peacoat made from 70s fabric in fluoro. Obviously, furniture was the anchor point, and we had a really good client base in Mossman, and it was a lot of fun.
I'm hearing you describe all of these items. I'm thinking, at 23, how did you know they would sell?
Not knowing, how hard retail can be, what it takes to, get through a whole year, what it takes to get through 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. You do have endless energy and enthusiasm, that excitement for just creating and creating an atmosphere, and people still talk about Chuck and Bob. It was a total, moment of madness and fun. And it did create all the relationships that are still going now. I learned about creating an experience that was above and beyond, a retail, structure. It was total theatre, atmosphere, fun, and it sort of fundamentally set the foundations for what I ended up doing with MCM. But it was, it was a playground of decorative arts, anchored by furniture, and I liked it a lot.
When we spoke recently, you mentioned that Art and Pike, which is one of the leading interior designers in Sydney, they purchased a mirror. Was it from this store?
The Chuck and Bob, the early foundations of the pieces that ended up going into the MCM collection, we worked on that pretty early. So that was a simple metal mirror. There's one in the back here. Mm-hmm. And it was that play on, and the French have always done it well, and industrial minimalism with decorative arts. Mm-hmm. And, that raw steel feel mixed with metal and sharpness. That was some of the first items. So I think it was a timber table and a mirror. And we were known, throughout Sydney, for creating cool things. And I remember the girls buying that mirror, and they were very organised and very, very clear about what they wanted. So I've been lucky enough to have a lot of support early from, really cool different designers. And it's part of the journey to have relationships and to make things. That's probably been the hardest thing as we grow, into a national brand, still creating and getting those things out into the marketplace, that are, that come from total creative execution as opposed to long-term planning, which sort of happens now.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like you were selling items, but you also custom making.
Yeah. So everything, initially I was making everything. So go down and get the metal welded, buy the glass, buy the timber for the back of the mirror board, screw that in, make sure it was set, and then deliver it to the house. So yeah, it was very, I'd call it Charles Dickens early on. And it was a lot of fun. It was probably the harder way around it, but obviously making stuff to order is a good way to start because you're not holding any inventory. Customer comes in, you pay the deposit, and then you go and work out how to make it. So that was the model. And, quickly but surely I would take on, bigger projects. We actually worked on the first Sass and Bide store in Oxford Street, doing all the aged mirrors on the wall. And that came out of, the girls coming over to Chuck and Bob originally and seeing Mirror and saying, Charlie, can you work on the new shop? And that was 20 years ago. So yeah, different things came out of relationship and conversations. And then I ended up, having a small workshop in Sydney. And over time that grew, to, sometimes up to 20 guys here working on everything from bookcases to libraries to kitchens. So there was a real history of, organic making of furniture and fittings, from aging, paint doors to doing all sorts of lanterns. So that sort of set the tone to make sure that the range going forward, I suppose, with MCM has always had that eclectic feel.
And it's interesting hearing you, speak of this history because I think of all of this manufacturing and custom, and that would test my patience.
Yeah.
It sounds like you'd have to have a lot of patience to sort of keep
The
finding new ideas.
Yeah, I think taking risks, you either take it personally or you don't. And that's the same thing with making something. You've got to back yourself to know that you can get it. And in the end, I'm not creating a car, but, if you've got a lot of energy, you can make some pretty cool, extraordinary things with your hands. And then from that, you can make some pretty cool things with manufacturers. So it's all energy, execution, and just having a good sense of style and ideas, whether it's hard or long. And, sometimes you can make something that looks old and broken, pretty cool. So, it's not so much just about executing it in, a clean manner. I guess it's just a matter of what it takes to make something look cool.
Or even, as you say that, it's like restoration.
Yeah.
Restoring things, which is also quite sustainable in the scheme of things. When you and I caught up, we had that phone call. Well, I went to that event.
Yep.
That awesome event on the Thursday night. Caught up with Leah and Penny and
good.
the gang. Yeah, you and I touched on everywhere and everything that you've done to date and how you said there's nothing I don't touch. Because we went through, I said, how are you still in the business? How are you still doing what you do while managing the team and staying within that creative process and executing everything that you love? So when you say, there's nothing I don't touch.
From everything from delivery to sales to procurement to, paying, setting up accounts. So, along that journey I have touched. And one of the things I've learned is you've got to set the agenda or set the pace or set the idea, and whether that's how you do delivery, how you introduce yourself to someone who comes into the showroom, how you have a conversation about something that's interesting, to spark imagination, probably having to be the creator and the salesperson and the delivery person. I had a pretty strong understanding of each point with a customer. that experience that I've had over a long period of time has enabled me to have a really strong influence on my staff in terms of what it takes to change the narrative or change the direction of a good outcome.
And it's like the customer journey, right? Really understanding what the customer needs, and how does that then translate into what you do with MCM House now?
Well, obviously, the customer is key. Finding the right balance between the product, the price, and the position of the stores, and so forth. Even with the website and the photography, maintaining that relationship with the customers, really important. And that's why we launched that loyalty program to reignite how that happens. But yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, look, logistics is probably the biggest challenge. Furniture's bulky. And I don't know if you've ever tried to do a furniture delivery in the middle of Sydney in the summer.
No, yeah.
The
back lane ways.
Navigating in a truck that, is manual, up a side street, and then unpacking into a house is challenging. So I went through all of that, and, that is something that is, part of the magic, I guess. Getting it sold and then getting it to the house, is an experience. So it's something we work on, and it's something that I'm actually looking forward to hopefully adding a bit more creativity and flair into that experience.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, the design of your pieces at MCM House, fabrics, timbers, where do you start with that process? Is that something that's quite organic for you, or?
I've always had a pretty clear idea of what I think works together. Natural elements is really important. Something's got to feel natural, and if it's not natural, it's got to sit in its place. Recently I've been playing with resin, and resin's a good thing to be able to put a more of a gloss finish that still is true to itself. So I guess it's playing into what is true to a material that you're using. Linen's quite good washed out. I prefer it more of a natural feeling linen. Stonewash, we originally did the stonewash sofas, which I loved. It was like an old jumper. And, with the tables, I've always tried to age the edges, open the grain. Metalwork as well. We try and probably do a patinaed finish, or textured, something that's a bit matte. Even our own pendants that are really well known, they've got a paper mache feel. So I think it's important that the furniture objects have a sense of texture and style that doesn't exactly put it in a trend. And that's something that I try to put with, and that's why we try and name these collections with a theme rather than a design direction.
I've always been someone who, I'm not big on trends. I think there's a timelessness, or there needs to be a timelessness in what we do as designers. Otherwise, you can kind of copy a trend. Like, I feel like my clients could go out there and just grab a trend and execute it themselves. But it's like, how do you create that timelessness, which I think MCM really articulates well in your sofas and things like that, particularly your modular sofas, because they're so versatile and you can pick your fabric. So you can customize it so much to keep that timelessness in the home.
As we grow, I'm able to add a few more elements. And you do want to be able to bring anything in and out of a house at any point of time. And that's probably the objects and the things that I've made in the past that I haven't liked are ones that I wouldn't put in my own house. That's always a test. Is it something that I'd have, and is it something that you can have for more than 5 to 10 years in a room. So it's important to have that sense, but and I'm excited to push the boundaries a little bit going forward. So we'll see how it goes.
I feel like you seem like someone who's pretty confident to push boundaries. Not too worried about, what people think or...
Yeah, well, look, you've got to... Sydney's a pretty interesting place to grow a brand. It's expensive, it's fast, and it's pretty competitive. Deciding to start here, with nothing and do it from one item to the next, is build up that resilience. And, you've got to take a risk. You've got to rent that store in the spot that no one else wants to take, and put in furniture that hopefully everyone loves.
Absolutely. And so 20 years, you said?
20 years since I first moved to Sydney, and then I had my first store, Chuck and Bob, and that was about 4 or 5 years in Mossman. And then we moved east and we were lucky enough to get the really cool space in Surrey Hills, just
The
near
same.
Victory Bakery.
Yeah.
And it was my first sort of store that had a hint of fashion about it. We had giant windows, quickly collaborated with artists pretty quickly because there was a vibe in the store. We did fashion shows with Hot Rods. Kim Ellery did one of her first fashion shows in a store. So, that relationship and that energy is really key, I think early on with a brand, how you can collaborate with other people and, feed off that excitement.
Absolutely.
Because that is part of the adrenaline, early on is, pushing.
And it helps create the branding, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it shows that you're collaborative. It shows that you're open to, for example, I find that there's a huge connection between fashion and interiors as well in terms of textiles and things like that, and how we craft and design and, upholstery and all that type
Yeah.
of thing as well. And I think the more people we collaborate with, the better on all fronts.
Yeah.
That's what I've loved about doing the podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's just chatting about how we can all connect,
Connect and
make
bring
our
forward.
jobs better or make our clients happy.
Yeah, collaboration's great, and I've liked that from, probably the diverse range of art and fashion, especially in Sydney. So I've been lucky enough to, have great people and also in food. We're pretty lucky. Bill Granger was one of my first customers in Chuck and Bob days, and him and Nat were lovely to me from really early on, and I ended up doing a pop-up Bill's Cafe at an early art show. So there's some really inspiring, personalities that have let me grow and do what I've done. So it's it's important to do that with a brand.
Yeah.
Because it's it adds a layer to what makes us different to our competitors.
Yeah, and it's talking point, right? These types of talking points. And so what does MCM stand for?
Look, it's a combination of letters, and there was always an idea that it was a trading company, MCM, Roman numerals, and they felt right.
Okay.
And then House. So it was, again, writing down your logo is a pretty important sort of thing, but you've got to move fast. And look, I love Chuck and Bob as a name. I've still got a surfboard with it on it. And MCM's always been a really strong set of letters together.
Bold.
Yeah, and it's held well. And it's it's relatable without it sort of feeling
Pretentious.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't read any pretentiousness going on here.
No.
Not at all. So MCM has grown into a national brand. Are you working internationally, or is it?
At different times I have. Global trade's an interesting. It's interesting. I think you've got to pick what you want to do. As we grow here, our planning and our timing, making sure that all the stock and the ranges are on the floor at the one time, as opposed to being just an international trader without retail presence. That's probably a different avenue that you could go
In terms of wholesale?
and just focusing on your product range being sold through other retailers. Once we've decided to be a retailer and roll that out, that's where the focus has been. And the internet also plays a place in that. You've got to have your price and you've got to have your sale periods. So it is something that I'll go back into, and I've probably more in the the items that are easy to ship as well. I do have an appetite still to do that, but at the moment, we're focused on the retail growth, and that's keeping us pretty busy.
And you've just opened Perth, or you're
Opening next week.
next?
So yeah, we had the Brisbane flagship, which is pretty exciting, and then we're into Perth. So Perth, we've been a long time coming for Perth. We've always had a really strong interest from the client there. I think it's a pretty similar landscape to Sydney,
Okay.
Perth, in terms of the personalities there. So yeah, we're excited for that.
That's so good. Because it's, so you're Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide? Was Adelaide on the cards?
Byron and Noosa, working on a space in Newcastle, and we'll make sure that we're in the right spots, but still inspire.
In terms of your team, how do you, this sounds quite a dispersed sort of, who have you got where to be managing all this? Do you?
Yeah, no, look, it's an organised structure. We've got a head office in Sydney, and we've got a really good team in place to make sure that we're hiring the right people and putting the right foundations to make sure that everyone who's working for us can succeed. So it hasn't come easy, that structure. As I said, not too long ago, I'd pick up everyone in the morning on the way to work, put them in the back of the van, pull up, give everyone their jobs, and then would do a rally at the end of the day. So, going from that to, a pretty national, international sort of structure.
In presence.
Yeah, you've got to trust the process. And, I've got some really experienced people in the head office now that are setting those guidelines. So.
And you're still quite hands-on though, aren't you?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. And I enjoy it more now than I have, at any given time.
It's good to be in that place. I'm not there yet, but I mean, I love what I do, but I can hear what you're saying, when you're supported by the right people and you've got that team who are experienced, that's one thing. And committed to building your brand and execute your vision. It's good to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, it's still challenging. The challenge is that, it's a retail environment. So, you're not just doing it free will. And there's different things that can impact that. And probably the better mood that I'm in and the more energy that I have, then that's pretty infectious. So I've learned that is how, I can turn things around. So, if I am on the other side, it has a pretty quick impact.
If we go into that then, you say if you're in a good mood, like what dictates your week of how you show up?
Yeah, well, look, vibe is, and even from our retail environment, vibe's really important. The right music, the right lighting.
Yeah. Energy.
Yeah, the energy. And so, even from how you move or carry something to, the idea, and then pushing, continue to push. Get up off your chair and continue to work around, see what can the room look better? Can the ad look better? Can the message look better? Can the font look better? That's that extra layer outside of just making it and opening it and trying to sell it. What are the things visually that you can make an impact with? And so, from early on, that's probably placing furniture in a decorative aspect. I know that something does actually work better over there than there. And you can relate that to a lot of stuff in life. So unfortunately, it can drive people nuts because it's not ever really how I want it when I see it. But sometimes it's great as well. So
It's looking at what perspective that team member might be bringing and why. I think I've really had to learn curiosity over the years instead of going really quickly into not judgment of other, but judgment of self, judgment of something. And now I'm like, okay, play the observer, remain curious. I wonder why, in that example, that layout has been done in that way, because then you might hear the team member say, oh, well, actually, I was thinking to sit here. That angle's better because from the front door, and oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see it like that. But now I do, for example. And sometimes a lot of us aren't open to having that conversation. You get so in your lane.
I've learned to not get stuck. Sometimes it's really wrong.
Yeah.
And
it just is.
Yeah, it's really wrong. And
Yeah.
you've just got to move forward. And even if you've wasted a lot of time or there's been a lot of energy, you just got to start the process to get it right.
And if revisions are necessary.
And look, when it's your own business, you're not paying yourself by the hour, so you don't care whatever it takes. And that's probably what set up the first period of time. There were just literally 7 days. And I worked 7 days for maybe 10 years, in the store.
Wow.
So Monday, Friday, and then full weekends. And most of those days was, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So it had a lot of fun though. It wasn't, it was hardcore. But that kind of energy is what it takes.
Commitment.
Yeah.
A lot of discipline.
Yeah.
How much surfing and all that?
Bit of madness.
Did you get your surfing in?
No, I don't surf. I probably should have. I've lived at Bondi for 10 years.
You just got the board though?
Yeah. Well, no, I had a board made for the store.
Oh, I see. That's cool.
Yeah, it's
That's
cool. And no, we had that in the store for a while when everyone was putting their brands on surfboards. I'll try and get surfing.
Yeah, give it a go. You've also got a workshop design studio division, and that's branched out into commercial and hospitality.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit more about.
Look, over the journey, and having shops in retail, you meet people. And also my ambition to, take on things and grow. And these are often things that sort of evolve into you being able to grow your business. Commercial is, a bigger picture. You've got the ability to, take on larger orders. It does require a different level of relationship. Some of these are over 2 years from start of project to the end. It's something that we've organically built up. But we've also done some pretty amazing stuff. So, it's cool, and it's it's led to some pretty diverse projects. And it's something that we've got our first showroom in Melbourne opening up, which will have some of the collection in there from that, but also open it up for all those relationships to expand.
When we spoke the other day, I said, oh yes, with the commercial, I was looking with Rebecca, the Balgala store, at some of those more commercial grade fabrics. But then you said, no, there's the more commercial grade fabrics or durable fabrics, but then there's the commercial grade furniture.
Yeah.
So they're different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I worked on the new Grounds Cafe in Erskineville.
Yeah.
And I call that, it's like a 50s Prada, laminate, vinyls, aged steel. In something that I'd put into a retail collection, but
That's cool. Different.
Very.
Quite standout, really.
Yeah.
This episode of Behind the Design is brought to you by my own studio, Unfolded. We create interiors that are functional, stylish, and deeply personal. Spaces that tell your story and feel like home. Explore more of our work at unfolded.com.au. If we dive into your creative process, it's quite, textural, tonal. How often do you want to be a bit more bold and do like bright colors and things? Like you've just mentioned vinyls and...
We're just playing with ceramics and resin at the moment, which I love. And funny enough, one of the things that I love movies now.
It's inspired by?
To get the direction and get the vibe.
Yeah.
It's easy for the retail staff to have a good relationship with the marketing team. Whether you actually have the movie even having dialogue or just the background. It's something that I think it's really relatable for an idea and a theme. And, whether it's the color of a landscape. Swordfish is a movie that we're talking about at Club Cabana at the moment. And people probably find that kind of weird, but there was something about the movie that's sort of translucent, a little bit futuristic, but still had that organic sort of touch around it. And funny enough, we did a bit of research and there was a special paint color for one of the cars in there. It was called Mystic Organic. Movies are great. They open up the conversation, they push you, and they're usually in an era. American Gigolo, great movie that Armani did all the clothes for, and since he's passed away, there's a lot of interest in all the clothing that he's done for movies. So it's something we always guys, pick out a fashion designer and say what movies they worked on, and you get the sets. And As Good as It Gets was a movie that not our current MCM collection, but a lot of clients used to love that house. I think
to rewatch that one. As
Good
as it
Jack
gets.
Nixon.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he? So Swordfish I haven't heard of.
Yeah, it was with John Travolta and Hugh Jackman, and it's got that. We've got some stainless steel coming at the moment. There's a nightclub that's got all stainless steel, but it's still got that fun and energetic sort of setting. So that stainless 90s is happening at the moment. So without saying not trend, I mean it is a little bit on trend, but I think there's a place for it.
And I think if it works rather than worrying if it's,
Yeah, and that's why I like to sort of put it in a context of whatever era it was great and then bring it back into something that's kind of fun.
Yeah, and make it your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, we've got some really cool colours in some ceramic lamps at the moment.
Okay.
That were great, some deep lemons and so there is a place for colour, but I often find it's still got to be timeless.
Yeah. And on brand and
Yeah.
working within your
Yeah,
strength.
we're just playing with the fabric colors even more. So I brought some beautiful blues in, and no, it feels right.
So running a brand and a business like MCM House, I would imagine you've had a few bumps along the way, personally and professionally. Are you open to sharing?
Look, it's brutal. Without having a complete plan or structure when you start, you are constantly working out, cash flow, and then obviously when you want to grow a brand, using that cash flow sensibly, and then knowing when to strike when you've got a bit of luck, when you do get a big order, do you double down and go and order more stock and range, and buy a van, and all the challenges that come out of organically, growing a brand, and then the challenges of probably having trust, with partners and them taking advantage, over periods of time. And
Business partners.
yeah, well, not business partners, but just even, people that you're contracting out, and that can be challenging. What I've learned is that, you've got to have a pretty strong resilience to not take stuff too personally. And even customers, being, frustrated with, the outcomes of what you've made or delivered. And then making sure that you're trying to do, what you set out to do. So, doing that at a pace, we're trying to grow at 50%. So it's pretty bold. But that only came out with some pretty serious planning. But, along the journey, there wasn't planning. There was just sheer will. And as a result, there were some pretty painful moments. I always like to have a sense of humor. If you can't laugh at a moment of absolute madness, I don't think you're doing the right thing. And so I try to keep that even now. When the office feeling a bit under pressure and there's a bit of tension, I'll let out a pretty loud noise, or try and get everyone, to change the energy. Because it is, like, work can be really stressful, when you're going fast. And, it's something that I've always enjoyed, is keeping that moment as light as possible at the right time. So, it's got me here without, feeling too, PSD from, 15 years in retail. And I know that the calendar year is, 12 months. There's some months where it's just, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And then there's some months where it's, it's game on. So you've got to ride that wave, and just, enjoy, enjoy when it's on, and then double down when it's not.
It's actually quite refreshing to hear, given how MCM looks on the highlight reel, the website, the surface, the events, beauty.
Without saying Breaking Bad, but, there's some serious, doubling down, when it was, it's tough. I remember just getting the first containers, when we started doing the bigger ranges, and getting that manufactured, and doing all the finishing, on the side, out the side of the street, and doing it the really long organic way has taken a lot of people with a lot of support. So, there's definitely elements that, could have done it differently, but, it's also given us our history, and I'm better for it. But yeah, planning's pretty key. If you can do that, set out a goal for 2 to 3 years, and then work out what you've got to do that. In hindsight, I was just, let's go, let's open, let's sell.
Get moving.
Yeah, and I said it to someone the other day. I've since that first day I opened a shop at 22 or 23, I've had a customer every day of my life. So the pressure's always on. But that's also why I'm, been able to grow a business.
And so if you do look back then to, Chuck and Bob / early days of MCM, is there one thing, even just as like a bit of a tip for listeners or people who might want to start their own brand, what would you say you would have done differently? Just one thing.
Look, there's not one thing. Sometimes don't waste time or energy on anything that's not going to have a 10x impact.
A 10x.
So, and I remember when I first had the shop, really frustrated I didn't have a proper point of sale. That wasn't primary, and I did lose focus. This is a long time ago. And so I think, you've just got to make sure that whatever you're putting the energy into, that the impact is going to, be pretty great. And if it's not going to have a big impact, don't waste too much time on it. I think probably the outcome's more or less what you're doing, and don't have too much of an impact on what's actually happening externally. So there's not a playbook. Energy's probably the one thing, you know what I mean? If you've got good energy, what you're doing, you're going to get a good outcome.
Intention too.
Yeah, good product. You've got to make sure you're selling something that you think is great as well. So,
like you said, back yourself.
Yeah, and it's got to be, it's got to be something that is great. And I was talking to someone the other day about some of the retailers that are struggling in Australia, and, in the end, fundamentally the product, and the price and the positioning is key. So I would say that to anyone starting up, work out where your product sits, what's unique about it, where the price is. Because if those things don't add up, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy. And so that's a pretty simple formula.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's cool. It's good to hear it, because everybody has such a different experience and different perspective on, when they build a brand or open a business.
Yeah, and look, that's a product-based brand. The different things you can do now, and look, probably services are a bigger brand going forward. Health and wellness, and coaching, and it is dramatically changing, and what people want. But I'm a big believer though that retail experience is going to be more stimulating. So, there's lots of cool opportunities. Got to have the right product at the right price. Or else you're up a uphill battle.
Absolutely. Keep it real.
Yeah.
What does success look like to you now? And has that differed quite a lot since you started MCM House?
Early on, success was survival. And, the excitement of doing things, getting through a week, I'd be just looking constantly. What have I got? What orders do I need to get out? What sales do I need to do to pay for what's going on? And I guess now success is about milestones and setting the goal and setting the agendas. And again, knowing that at the end of a period of time, we're going to try and open up 3 stores or launch a collection on time, introduce a new commercial brand. And we've got metrics, so you do have things that you can measure success on. And then how happy, the staff are, or what kind of response we get. So the success is a bit different, and probably my love for what we're making at the time, that's success for me. And then my relationship with the staff, when we're doing well, there's a lot of excitement and energy around, whether it's an opening or a new collection, or, even what's happening on a Monday morning. And so, that's what I call success. And just probably be inspiring.
It sounds like feeling supported, by the team, like highs and lows, but just having that consistent.
Yeah. Well, you want to make sure that what we're doing, is something that everyone feels excited about. So that's what I'd call success. So you've got success when you're just pushing everyone to the limit. But if you're pushing everyone to the limit without a product or a positioning or an idea or a theme, then it doesn't feel successful. So that's my take on it.
So Charlie, deep in thought, we always wrap up with a funny question. So my question to you is, which design trend feels like the Crocs of interiors? Ugly, but somehow still hanging on.
Ugly's probably still a term that I'm not going to say whether, it's ugly or not, but there seems to be an obsession with arches at the moment, or corners, or rounded corners. And I don't look, I love an arch, there's a certain spot for it, but I have noticed some things right now. You walk into a place and you can't see a square edge. And so I would say, the roundness and the softness of this design obsession is pretty out of control. So it'd be interesting to see when that finally does break. 'Cause it doesn't seem to be breaking.
It's true. I agree with you. They're not ugly, but they're everywhere.
Yeah.
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 Maybe the block started
Yeah.
or something.
I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah, look, there's different things. Look, fashion trends, because the phones and Instagram go pretty wild. So, but anyway, look, at least everyone's doing something.
That's so true. Very pragmatic of you.
It is. It is. So, no, and look, I love everyone doing stuff, but there's, the softness and the roundness is too much.
Well, thank you for being a part of Behind the Design.
Thank you very much.
So good to have you on.
Thank you.
There's so much I've taken away from this chat with Charlie. That trusting your instincts can be more powerful than any plan. That design isn't just about furniture. It's about creating a feeling. And that growth doesn't have to mean losing authenticity. It's about scaling what you believe in. For everyone listening, you can explore Charlie's work and the world of MCM House online or by visiting one of their beautiful showrooms. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves design as much as we do. I'm Camilla Ingall, and this has been Behind the Design. Until next time.